What is secretly going on in the quiet corridors of the Vatican, where one decision can shake the entire Catholic Church? A mysterious figure from a distant land is becoming the center of attention. This man has a strong faith and a distinct vision that makes many wonder if this is the one chosen to lead the Church through the storms of time. When the roots of Christianity in the West are shaking, as the world is caught up in cultural and spiritual upheaval, one question cannot help but linger. Could this character with his strong stance and surprising origins write a new page for the global Church? Let's explore the story behind this mysterious man and what it means for the future of faith. The sky over Rome was overcast with gray clouds. Inside the Sistine Chapel, the space is filled with silence. 135 cardinals walked slowly under Michelangelo's magnificent frescoes. The world held its breath waiting for the white smoke, the sign of a new pope. But this time there was something different hanging in the air. An unlikely name is being whispered among the most powerful people. An African name, a conservative name, a name that carries with it tranquility, steadfastness, and unwavering faith. While many place their bets on European physicians, Vatican diplomats, or progressive thinkers, he quietly prayed. He doesn't campaign, doesn't give interviews, doesn't compete for attention. But his presence, though silent, was strangely powerful. There is something about him that worries some, excites others, divides opinions, but at the same time inspires hope. Since the abdication of Pope Benedict XVI and the election of Pope Francis, the Catholic Church has undergone profound changes. Pope Francis, despite his emphasis on mercy and inclusion, recognizes that the Church needs solid foundations and voices that are unafraid to confront the temptations of the modern world. Pope Francis himself has praised Cardinal Sarah as a man of deep spiritual life and absolute loyalty to the Church, making him a figure not to be overlooked in this conclave. Homie Robert Sarah was born in a small village in Guinea where there was no electricity, no clean water, and not a single book in the house. His parents were illiterate farmers. On the surface, his life may have been just another anonymous existence, but God had other plans. At the age of 12, young Sarah asked to enter the seminary. There was not a Bible in the house, but there was faith. A faith that shines through the silent prayers of mother and the dignity of father's hard work. It was in poverty that he learned to appreciate essential things, and from the anonymity of the African jungle emerged one of the most powerful figures of the 21st century Catholic Church. His journey did not follow the conventional path. He did not mingle with the European clerical elite, nor did he study at prestigious universities. Yet at the age of 34, he became the youngest bishop in the world, appointed by Pope John Paul II. Then Benedict XVI called him to Rome, and Francis continued to hold him in important positions. 3 popes, 3 different visions, but one cardinal respected by all. Although representing a more pastoral and open perspective, Pope Francis never took Cardinal Yar's spiritual steadfastness for granted. He is described as a man of deep prayer, courageous, charged with preserving tradition, but with a heart always open to the poor, just as Pope Francis always advocated. While many religious leaders make their mark with words, Homie Sarah stands out for the opposite. Silence is not an empty silence, but a silence that communicates, confronts, and condemns without screaming. A quiet prayer in the midst of an increasingly turbulent world. It was through this silence that he became one of the most influential cardinals in the Catholic Church. When he was appointed cardinal, many expected him to become more political, more diplomatic, or to blend into the familiar discourse of Rome. But he chose the opposite path, writing books that became global bestsellers. Prominent among them is The Power of Silence. In it he writes that God is silence, and it is in the silence that he tells us, Rose Sarah, that the gentleness of the world is a spiritual trap. His mission is to remind the Church that truth does not require applause, but courage. Even Pope Francis, despite his different style and approach, has repeatedly acknowledged his spiritual depth. Pope Francis has publicly acknowledged on more than one occasion that despite occasional disagreements, Homie Sarah is a man of prayer and a lover of the Church. In divisive times, This recognition speaks volumes. Africa, with its cultural diversity, strong traditions, and vibrant faith, is finally finding its voice at the heart of the Catholic Church. And who better to represent the silent Africa that has long been relegated to a secondary role in Vatican decisions than Cardinal Robert Sarah, the Guinean cardinal with a steadfast and powerful voice. Cardinal Robert Sarah was more than just an African in Rome. He is the embodiment of an Africa that carries centuries of faith, resilience, and hope. In a church long dominated by Europeans, his rise took on deeper significance. A shift in the distribution of spiritual influence, a silent revolution that highlights the power of the faith of the bandits. Pope Francis, while pursuing a global and inclusive pastoral vision, recognized and supported the vitality of African Catholicism. He has visited the continent many times to understand the realities and challenges of African Catholics. For Francis, the Church must not be allowed to become a product of Western culture. The Church must be universal, speaking all languages, embracing all realities, and bringing Christ's message to all people. Cardinal Yara's most notable trait was her staunch defense of Catholic tradition. In a world where values and principles seem to be constantly wavering, he stands as an unshakable anchor. His conservatism was not merely ideological, but rooted in a deep spiritual conviction that the truth revealed by Christ is immutable. In his writings and sermons, he often warned against what he called the dictatorship of relativism, a phrase inherited from Benedict XVI. For him, the Church cannot succumb to modern pressures and sacrifice core principles just to gain social acceptance or gain fleeting popularity. This steadfastness made him a controversial figure in some circles, but also made him a beacon of hope for traditionalist Catholics who feared that the Church's unique identity was fading. He was outspoken on liturgical issues, stressing that the Mass must be celebrated with reverence and holiness, focused on God rather than on the community. His advocacy of celebrating Mass in the East, where the priest faces east to symbolize Christ, caused heated debate, especially when he proposed a return to this ancient practice in 2016. His views on moral issues are also crystal clear. He vehemently opposes what he calls gender ideology, seeing it as a threat to the traditional family, as well as divorce, same-sex marriage, and abortion. These positions resonate with many African Catholics who hold firmly to long-standing values, undeterred by cultural changes. Homie Sarah has given speeches comparing Western homosexuality and abortion ideologies along with Islamic fanaticism to two apocalyptic beasts with the same demonic origins as 20th-century Nazism and communism. These strong statements show his willingness to defy political correctness to defend what he sees as the core truths of the faith. In Cardinal Sarah's eyes, the West is in the midst of a spiritual crisis. Through interviews and books, he has expressed concern about what he sees as the death of faith in Europe in contrast to the vibrant religious life in Africa. "I fear the West is dying." He has hinted that Europe could lose its Christian roots due to immigration and cultural upheaval. This view makes him an African defender of traditional European values, values that many Europeans themselves seem to be abandoning. For him, Europe must rediscover its Christian foundations to face today's challenges, including what he sees as the threat from radical Islam and aggressive secularism. The spiritual and intellectual bond between Cardinal Sarah and Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI is clear and profound. Both shared a theological vision based on objective truth, centered on Christ, and steadfastly defended the liturgy as the highest expression of the divine mission. It was Benedict XVI who made him a cardinal in 2010, recognizing in him a defender and interpreter of continuity. Understand Vatican II in harmony with the Church's previous tradition rather than seeing it as a break with the past. This approach continues to guide Cardinal Yara's thinking, and he often refers to Benedict XVI. After Benedict XVI's resignation in 2013, Homie Sarah remained one of his most faithful theological successors. When Pope Francis appointed him prefect of the Congregation for Divine Worship and the Discipline of the Sacraments in 2014, many saw it as a balancing act. ensuring that a more traditional voice still shapes the Church's liturgy globally. With the death of Pope Francis, the Catholic Church now faces a decisive question. Who will be the next pope? Many possibilities are being discussed, but few have attracted as much attention as Cardinal Robert Sarah, a Black African and a conservative. The idea that he could become the next leader of the Catholic Church is more than just a rumor. The departure of Pope Francis has left not only the Vatican but the entire Catholic world in a state of uncertainty. Can a son of Africa with an indomitable flame of faith lead the Church through the storms of our times? Pope Francis' pontificate, marked by an open and inclusive pastoral spirit, has left a legacy of mercy, compassion, and engagement with modern society. However, it also caused divisions, especially with figures like Cardinal Robert Sarah, who questioned and resisted many of his ways. A key question arises. Will the Church move in a more conservative direction after Pope Francis? And is Hong Yara the one to lead that path? His name has emerged as a potential candidate for the papacy, and his election would be a historic event that would both excite and worry him. With his steadfast commitment to preserving tradition, he could mark a dramatic departure from Francis' reforms, while reaffirming the core roots of Catholicism. This would be a real reorientation of the Church's mission in the context of modern society, which seems increasingly distant from traditional Catholic principles. Moreover, if he becomes the first African and Black pope in the history of the Church, this event will be revolutionary not only for the Church itself, but for the whole world. It would signal a global shift, underscoring the growing influence of the Church in Africa and the importance of an African voice on the international stage, especially at a time when Catholicism in Europe and other Western regions is in decline. Meanwhile, in Africa, that faith is blossoming. If Cardinal Robert Sarah is elected pope, his reign will surely be marked by countercultural stances. In a world that celebrates speed, he values contemplation. In a society oriented towards self-expression, he emphasized silence. In an age that often puts conformity above truth, he considered doctrine to be supreme. Following the death of Pope Francis on Easter Monday, speculation about the possibility of Homie Sarah's election has skyrocketed. His name spread quickly in conservative circles on social media, where many traditional Catholics saw him as the anti-Francis they longed for, especially after a decade in which progressive forces gained influence in the Church. Homie Sarah has always held conservative views on issues such as same-sex marriage, gender ideology, Western secularism, radical Islam, and the way uncontrolled migration affects European culture and values. So until recently, there were doubts about his ability to gain enough support from the cardinals. His outspoken style, conservative thinking, and advanced age of 79 have led many to question his feasibility. Yet despite his criticisms of modern society, Cardinal Sarah envisions a hopeful future for the Church, especially for young Catholics who yearn for an authentic and demanding faith. He believes that some efforts to make Catholicism more accessible risk undermining its core claims. Young people, meanwhile, are attracted by the radical nature of the gospel and the depth of Church traditions. In his talks with young people, he often promotes a faith that goes against popular culture, calling them to abandon relativism and hedonism to discover the freedom that comes from obeying the truth. For him, the future of the Church lies not in conforming to the spirit of the times, but in offering a clear and attractive option, radically different from the world. He saw America and Africa as the two lungs of the future of Christianity when the faith in Europe was dying or dead. The Church must grow from places like Africa and the Americas where the faith is still alive. While the West struggles with materialism and practical atheism, Africa is a young continent with deeply religious people. In this light, Homie Sarah sees Africa as the new source of the Church, where Christianity will have the greatest vitality in the future. When the councils gathered to choose Francis' successor, the name Robert Sarah emerged as a serious, if challenging, choice. His election would face many obstacles because most cardinals were appointed by Francis and may prefer a path of succession. However, Homie Sarah remains a real possibility for a transformation in the Church. His reign would mark an internal counter-reform, focusing on doctrinal rigor and sacred liturgy. Despite his advanced age, he represents large groups within Catholicism that felt marginalized during the Franciscan years. Indeed, this African speaks for those who believe that the Church has lost its clarity and morality and has become an echo of secular trends. So his candidacy is not just an election, it reflects a deep tension about the spiritual direction of the Church. While the world awaits the white smoke, Homie Robert Sarah remains a powerful symbol of the true universality of the Catholic Church, a church that transcends cultures and continents. Whatever the outcome of the conclave, his steadfast faith, courage before the Bach High, and devotion to tradition will continue to inspire Catholics around the world. History is still unfolding, and the Holy Spirit who has guided the Church through the centuries will have the final say. In the meantime, the African fox continues to pray, faithful to the silence that has always defined his spiritual journey, ready to serve the Church in any role.